The moment my ex-husband decided to humiliate me in the middle of a $500 a plate charity dinner was, ironically, the moment I realized I had already won. He was standing near the top of the grand staircase inside the Worthington Hotel's rooftop ballroom, dressed in a tuxedo that cost more than my first car. My former best friend was on his arm, her left hand arranged just slightly in front of her body so the diamond ring caught every spotlight in the room. And when he spotted me across the floor, standing next to my client, holding a glass of champagne I had not touched, the look on his face shifted from surprise to something uglier, something he had been saving up. He walked toward me like he owned the air in the room, which, given that his firm had co-sponsored the event, he probably believed he did. "Well," he said loudly enough for the 6 people nearest to us to turn their heads. "I did not expect to see you here, Fiona." He said my name like it was a mild inconvenience. I smiled at him the same way I smile at opposing counsel when they hand me fraudulent ledgers, the kind of smile that does not reach the eyes. "I was invited," I said, "by a client." He looked at my glass, at my dress, at the fact that I was standing alone, then he smiled wider and leaned slightly toward my former best friend, like they were sharing an inside joke. "Still working the room," he said. "Some things never change." Before I continue, let me know where you are watching from in the comments. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever had someone underestimate you and lived to watch them regret it. My name is Fiona. I am 36 years old and I am a senior forensic accountant at one of the largest accounting firms in Houston, Texas. My job is to find money that other people try to hide. I am exceptionally good at it. I had been married for 9 years to the man now standing in front of me, enjoying his little performance. He was 40 years old, the managing director of a private equity firm called Mediation Partners. He had what people in Houston's business circles called a golden handshake, the kind of reputation that gets you the right table at the right restaurant and the right phone call returned first. He was charming in the way that only men who have never been truly held accountable for anything can be charming. Effortlessly, convincingly, right up until the moment the numbers do not add up. I had met my former best friend, the woman currently wearing his ring, when we both worked at the same accounting firm 8 years ago. She was the kind of person who remembered your coffee order and texted you on bad days. I introduced her to him at our firm's holiday party 7 years ago. She and I used to joke that she was practically family. Turns out we were both right about that, just not in the way I thought. I found out about the 2 of them at another party. Last December, the kind of moment where you walk into a room and understand everything in the space between one breath and the next. I did not make a scene. I walked back out, drove home, and sat at my desk until 3 in the morning, cross-referencing everything I could think of. He filed for divorce 6 weeks later, irreconcilable differences. He said I had never been fully present in the marriage, that I loved spreadsheets more than I loved him, that he had been lonely for years and he deserved to actually feel something. All of that may have been true, none of it excused what he did next. During mediation, his attorneys submitted financials showing that Mediation Partners had suffered significant losses over the prior fiscal year. The firm's valuation, according to the documents they provided, had dropped by nearly 6%. His attorneys argued his business interest was worth a fraction of what I believed it to be. My attorney pressed on it. Their expert witness produced reports, quarterly statements, projected deficits. It looked airtight on paper. It felt wrong in my gut. I knew what a fabricated profit and loss statement looked like. I had spent 11 years tearing apart fraudulent financials for clients in litigation, but knowing something and proving it are 2 entirely different things, and I was sitting across a mediation table, not at a deposition. My attorney advised me that without concrete evidence of concealment, we were risking a prolonged battle we might not win. So I settled. I walked away with a fraction of what I was owed. What I did not walk away from was the certainty that the numbers were a lie. For 18 months, I kept that certainty folded up quietly in the back of my mind while I rebuilt my life. I moved into a clean apartment in Midtown Houston. I took on more cases. I began compiling a private file the same way I build every professional case, one verifiable fact at a time, without announcing my direction to anyone. I was not finished, I was simply not in a hurry. The Houston Children's Hospital Charity Gala happened every October at the Worthington Hotel downtown. Mediation had co-sponsored it for 4 consecutive years. My client, a real estate developer named Xavier, who had been using my firm for portfolio auditing for 3 years, attended every year and had invited me as his guest for the first time. I had accepted without hesitation. I had not anticipated that my ex-husband would choose to make a spectacle of my presence there, but I had prepared for the possibility. He looked me up and down with the particular expression that men wear when they want you to feel small without technically doing anything you could point to later. Then he said it, loudly, to the entire pocket of the room. "Leaving you was the best decision I ever made," he announced, not quite to me, to the air around us, to the 8 executives and their spouses who had involuntarily become his audience. "I spent 9 years watching you choose your career over everything, over us, over any possibility of a real life. And I am standing here tonight with a woman who actually shows up, and a life that is actually real." He gestured at me like I was a mildly interesting footnote. "So whatever you are doing over here, I hope it is worth the trade." I looked at him for a long moment. I set my champagne glass down on the nearest high-top table. Then I checked my watch. "Let's see if you still feel that way in about 90 seconds, I said. He laughed. He actually laughed, turning toward my former best friend with the smug, condescending look of a man who believes he has already decided the outcome of every conversation he walks into. He thought I was bluffing. He thought the only move left for a divorced woman standing at her ex-husband's charity event was a weak and desperate parting shot. He did not hear the elevator chime directly behind him. My brother-in-law stepped off that elevator looking the way he always looks when he is working. Like a man who has already calculated how everything is going to end. He is a special agent with IRS Criminal Investigation, the division that handles criminal tax fraud, financial crimes, and money laundering. He is 6'2" and carries himself with the quiet authority of someone who does not need to raise his voice to command a room. He was dressed in a dark suit with his federal badge clipped visibly to his belt. Walking beside him was another agent, a woman, carrying a thick sealed envelope. And walking directly behind them both, with the expression of a man who had spent 8 months of his patience reaching its absolute limit, was Xavier. My client, my largest account, the man whose $2.8 million private investment trust had, according to a quarterly statement issued by Meridian Capital Partners, suffered what the report called an unavoidable market-driven deficit over the prior 18 months. Xavier was not a man who gave much away in his face. He was 61 years old and had built 3 separate real estate companies from nothing. He did not raise his voice. He did not need to. The way he looked at my ex-husband communicated everything that needed to be communicated. My former best friend saw them first. She had been in the middle of reaching up to adjust a strand of hair, her ring catching the ballroom light exactly the way she had practiced, when she looked past my ex-husband's shoulder and simply stopped moving. Every bit of color left her face. Her hand dropped to her side. The champagne flute she had been holding slipped from her fingers. It hit the marble floor and shattered, a single clean crack that cut through the low hum of cocktail conversation and made a dozen heads turn. Champagne spread in a slow arc across the floor, catching the light from the chandeliers above. My ex-husband turned around at the sound. He saw his most important client standing next to a federal badge. He saw the sealed envelope. He saw his former best employee, my former best friend, standing against the wall looking like a woman who had just watched the floor open beneath her feet. And every single thing he had felt entitled to tonight left his face at once. My brother-in-law covered the distance between them in 4 deliberate strides and placed the envelope flat against my ex-husband's chest. The impact forced him back half a step, his hands flying up instinctively to catch it before it fell. "What is this?" he demanded, tearing at the federal seal. "A subpoena," my brother-in-law said. Quiet, steady, carrying clearly across the stillness that had settled over the nearest quarter of the ballroom. "Meridian Capital Partners is the subject of a criminal tax fraud investigation. I'd strongly suggest you stop talking and contact an attorney before the next sentence out of your mouth." My ex-husband looked down at the documents. He looked up Xavier. He looked at me. "You arranged this," he said. His voice had gone raw. I did not answer him. I watched him read. Here is what those documents contained. Over the prior 18 months, Meridian Capital Partners had managed a series of private investment accounts on Xavier's behalf. My ex-husband, using his authority as managing director, had rerouted portions of those funds through a set of single-member LLCs registered in Delaware. Shell companies with no employees, no physical addresses, and no legitimate operations. The capital was transferred in increments just under federal reporting thresholds. The fraudulent LLCs then generated false business expenses that reduced the taxable income reported on the firm's annual returns. My former best friend had signed those returns. She was a licensed CPA, her signature gave them legal weight, and she had known exactly what she was signing. Xavier's internal accountant had flagged the discrepancy 4 months earlier. A quiet forensic review had confirmed the loss was not market-driven, it was manufactured. Xavier's attorney contacted IRS Criminal Investigation in July. My brother-in-law had been building the case ever since. He had called me 3 weeks prior, not to ask for anything, but to let me know that the instincts I had carried for 18 months were about to be validated in a federal proceeding. I had not said a word to anyone, I had simply accepted Xavier's invitation and waited. I could see the exact moment my ex-husband found his own name on the second page of the subpoena. I watched his eyes stop moving. "This is a mistake," he said, his voice climbing. "Xavier, I can explain the deficit. There were genuine market conditions that quarter." "The forensic review team disagrees," my brother-in-law said. "Then the team is wrong." He was scanning the room now, searching for someone who might still be an ally. Several executives who had been laughing with him 30 minutes earlier had taken a quiet step back. "Fiona, you put them up to this. You have been angry about the settlement for 1.5 years and this is your version of." "I audit Xavier's portfolio," I said. "I have for 3 years, this is not about you." He knew I was not being entirely honest. The IRS case had its own origin, its own timeline. But the 17 reference points I had quietly handed my brother-in-law 3 weeks earlier had compressed 8 months of investigative work into something considerably sharper. He opened his mouth to say something else. The elevator chimed a second time. His mother came into the ballroom the way she always entered a room, as though she were already the most important person in it. She was 70 years old, dressed in a cream pantsuit, carrying an evening bag, and wearing the expression of a woman who had spent 7 decades believing that certainty and volume were the same thing. She had not been on the guest list. She had apparently convinced someone at the door that she was accompanying her son, arriving separately. She swept in, took in the frozen scene. Her son holding a federal document, a badge gleaming under the chandelier, my former best friend pressed against the wall, and her face moved quickly through surprise and confusion before landing hard on blame. She pointed at me. "What have you done?" "I haven't done anything," I said. "Your son is being served with a federal subpoena." "Because you arranged it." She crossed the room with the speed of a woman who had spent decades getting her way. "You could not stand that he moved on. You could not stand that he chose a life that didn't include you. So you called in a favor from..." She glanced at my brother-in-law with an expression I recognized and was done tolerating. "From whoever this is, and you manufactured a crime because you have nothing else left." My ex-husband said her name once, sharply, quietly. She did not hear him. "My son built that firm from $40,000 and a leased office in Greenway Plaza," she announced, to no one and everyone. "He gave 60 people jobs in this city. And when that woman, she meant me, when she refused to be a real partner to him, when she chose billable hours over their marriage year after year, he finally rebuilt his life. He protected what he built. He made smart decisions about where certain assets would go. And no one has the right to penalize a man for being more financially sophisticated than the people around him." "Mom," his voice this time was almost inaudible. She did not hear that either. "He moved the money to protect it," she continued, her voice rising. "When he could see that she was going to use her position and her professional connections to strip him clean in that mediation, he was smart enough to put certain accounts somewhere her attorneys couldn't reach. He was not going to sit there and let her take everything he'd spent 15 years building just because she'd turned his own career against him. He had every right to protect himself." Mom stopped talking. The room heard both sentences. The first one established intent, the second one confirmed he knew it. My brother-in-law looked at the female agent beside him. A brief exchange, entirely non-verbal. She had already shifted her weight slightly, the way agents do when new information requires immediate documentation. My former best friend made a sound I had never heard from her before, not a word, just a sound like something structural giving way. She had known about the concealed assets. She had to have known. She had helped construct the LLC framework. She had signed returns built on those structures, and she had sat in that mediation room 18 months ago and watched me walk out the door with less than I was owed, and she had said nothing. She had adjusted her ring on her finger and said absolutely nothing. The Meridian Capital valuation submitted in mediation was based on numbers you helped structure, I said, and I was not talking to my ex-husband anymore. I was talking to her, clearly, directly, in a room full of people who would remember this. You knew the real value of the firm. You signed the returns. You are the CPA of record on documents that are now the foundation of a federal investigation. She did not deny it. My ex-husband said her name once, in a voice that was half warning and half panic. I didn't know it would go this far, she said. Her voice had gone very small. He told me it was restructuring. He said it was a legitimate way to protect business assets. We'll discuss that distinction in a formal setting, my brother-in-law said, in the tone of a man who has heard the word restructuring used to describe a crime more times than he can count. His mother had gone completely still. She was standing in the center of the Worthington Hotel ballroom, in front of 2 federal agents and approximately 60 of Houston's most connected business people, slowly processing what she had just said out loud. The managing partner of Meridian Capital, the man who held the firm's founding capital, and whose professional reputation was attached to everything my ex-husband had done under that letterhead, stepped out of the crowd. He was 65 years old, and he looked like a man watching a building he had spent decades constructing catch fire from the inside. Whatever cooperation your investigation requires, he said to my brother-in-law, with the brisk efficiency of a man who is already doing damage control, you will have it from this firm, tonight, without condition. My ex-husband looked at his managing partner and understood that was the end of Meridian Capital as he had known it. My brother-in-law handed him a second document, a civil asset freeze filed that morning, covering all accounts and business interests attached to his managing directorship, pending the full outcome of the criminal investigation, his corporate access, his distribution accounts, every financial lever he had spent 15 years building, locked. You cannot do this here, he said, his voice cracking at the edges, not in front of. We can, my brother-in-law said, we did. My ex-husband looked at me one final time, and I looked back at him the same way I look at every set of fraudulent financials after the work is done, with the clean and absolute certainty of someone who has already confirmed where every number went. I told you, I said, 92nd. He was escorted from the Worthington Hotel ballroom by federal agents, while the string quartet, apparently not briefed on correct protocol for this kind of situation, continued playing quietly in the far corner of the room. The society photographers who had been hired to capture the evening's lighter moments captured this one too. His mother stood in the center of the ballroom until a hotel coordinator gently steered her toward the elevator. My former best friend sat down on the nearest chair and did not move for a very long time. The next 4 months moved the way federal investigations move, with the grinding, methodical patience of a process that does not need to hurry because it already has everything it needs. The criminal case against my ex-husband included charges of tax evasion, wire fraud, and fraudulent concealment. My attorney filed a motion to reopen the divorce settlement based on the newly documented asset concealment, and the family court granted it. The civil proceedings were not lengthy. The evidence was not subtle. A forensic reconstruction of Meridian Capital's actual accounts showed that at the time of our mediation, the firm's real valuation was approximately 4 times what had been reported to the court. My ex-husband's sworn financial disclosures during mediation were, in the judge's written opinion, substantially and deliberately false. The judge voided the original settlement in full. The corrected distribution of marital assets combined with punitive damages awarded for the deliberate concealment totaled $2.4 million. It was not a windfall, it was what the math had always pointed to before someone rearranged the columns. My ex-husband was convicted on all counts and sentenced to 61 months in a federal correctional facility in Beaumont, Texas. The sentencing guidelines for wire fraud in the Fifth Circuit are not gentle, and 4 months of arguing mitigating factors had not moved the jury toward leniency. His mother lost the River Oaks condo that had been subsidized by his income. I heard this secondhand. I did not follow up. My former best friend entered a cooperation agreement. In exchange for providing full testimony about the LLC structure and signing off on her role in the fraudulent returns, she received 3 years of probation and 120 hours of community service. She also surrendered her CPA license. The Texas State Board of Public Accountancy does not grant exceptions for fraud committed in the context of a personal relationship. She currently works a position that does not require a professional license. The diamond ring was sold to cover her legal fees. I never spoke to her again. There was nothing left that needed to be said. Xavier's trust was fully restored through the civil asset recovery proceedings. He sent me a bottle of 20-year-old scotch and a handwritten note that said only, "I always trusted your instincts." I kept the note on my desk. I used the settlement to do the one thing I had been turning over in my mind for 11 years. I left the firm where I had built my career and opened my own practice. 1 floor in a glass building on Post Oak Boulevard, with 4 forensic accountants, 2 paralegals, and a caseload booked 8 months out. We specialize exclusively in high-net-worth divorce proceedings, where one party has reason to believe the financial disclosures were not made in good faith. I know what those cases look like. I know how the numbers get rearranged. I know how a profitable, thriving business can be made to appear decimated on paper when the right person has the right motivation to lie about it. About a year after the gala, I was standing on the rooftop terrace of my own building on a Thursday evening when the Houston skyline had gone gold and the air had finally dropped below 90 degrees. My sister was beside me. My brother-in-law was leaning against the railing with the particular expression of a federal agent whose case has closed exactly the way it was supposed to. I had spent 9 years being told I was too precise, too focused, too locked inside my professional mind to be a fully present wife. Maybe that was true. Maybe I was always going to be better at this, at the clean, verifiable logic of numbers, at the patience required to build something from the inside out, than I ever was at being the person he wanted standing beside him. What I know is that the man who announced in a hotel ballroom that leaving me was the best decision he ever made as far as his sentence in Beaumont. The woman who wore his ring is rebuilding her life without a license. And I am standing on the roof of something I built with my own name on the door, watching the city go quiet in the early autumn dark, and I do not feel angry. I feel exactly the way I always feel when the final numbers are confirmed and the account balances correctly. I feel done. The best revenge is not what you take from someone when they fall. It is what you build while they are busy convincing themselves you already lost. Thank you for listening. Stay sharp, stay patient, and remember, the numbers always tell the truth eventually. Someone just has to be willing to follow them all the way to the end.